You think money buys class? You think a $5,000 bespoke suit gives you the right to treat people like furniture? Arthur Sterling certainly thought so. He walked into one of New York City's most exclusive restaurants, believing the woman pouring his vintage Pinot Noir was just another faceless servant, someone he could humiliate for sport. He thought he could ruin her life without a second thought. He was dead wrong. This is the story of a shocking encounter between a waitress pushed to her limit and a billionaire who crossed the line, and the secret weapon she used to bring his massive ego crashing down in a language he never expected her to speak. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of wealth on 57th Street in Manhattan, sandwiched between the glass towers of Billionaire's Row. It was the kind of place where the tasting menu cost more than most people's monthly rent, and the air always smelled faintly of white truffles and old money. For Chloe Danvers, it was a battlefield. Chloe adjusted the collar of her starched white uniform, wincing slightly. Her feet throbbed. She was 6 hours into a double shift, and the heels management required the female waitstaff to wear were designed for aesthetics, not human anatomy. At 26, Chloe had the kind of face that blended into the background: pale, tired eyes, hair pulled back into a severe bun. To the clientele of the Obsidian Room, she wasn't a person. She was a delivery system for foie gras and Dom Perignon. Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling water. Chloe, move it, snapped Henry, the floor manager. Henry was a man who believed stress was a management style. And don't look the guests in the eye unless they address you. We have VIPs incoming. Understood, Henry, Chloe said, her voice soft and steady. She grabbed the crystal pitcher and moved across the plush velvet carpet. She was good at this, being invisible. It was a survival mechanism. No one at the Obsidian Room knew that Chloe wasn't just a struggling waitress. They didn't know about the master's degree in international relations, gathering dust in a drawer in her Queens apartment. They didn't know about the crushing student loan debt that had forced her out of an unpaid internship at the UN and into the service industry. They certainly didn't know about her childhood in Taipei and Singapore, following her diplomat father from post to post, absorbing languages like a sponge. To them, she was just the help. The restaurant buzzed that night. In one corner, a famous tech CEO argued quietly with his wife. Near the window, a senator laughed far too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Then, at exactly 8:15 p.m., the energy in the room shifted. The heavy oak doors swung open. The hostesses stiffened. Henry straightened his tie so fast he nearly choked himself. Arthur Sterling had arrived. Arthur was a man who took up space. In his late 40s, he was handsome in a predatory way, silver-flecked hair, a granite-sharp jawline. He was the CEO of Sterling Hawley, a private equity firm infamous for buying beloved American companies, stripping them for parts, and selling the scraps overseas. He was worth $4 billion, and he wore his wealth like a weapon. He wasn't alone. 2 younger men in identical navy suits flanked him, his yes men. A striking woman in a red dress followed, already looking bored before she even sat down. Table 1. Now, Henry hissed, gripping Chloe's arm tightly. Mr. Sterling is particular. He requested the corner booth. Do not mess this up, Chloe. One mistake and you're out. I mean it. Chloe nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had handled difficult tables before, but Arthur Sterling had a reputation. He didn't just complain about food, he hunted for weakness. She approached the table, pitcher in hand. Arthur was already talking, his voice booming over the restaurant's quiet hum. I told them if the lithium deal doesn't close by Friday, I'm pulling the plug, he said, not even looking up. I don't care about the environmental regulations in Nevada. Bypass them. That's what I pay the lawyers for. Chloe approached from the right, exactly as trained. Good evening, Mr. Sterling. Sparkling or still? Arthur stopped mid-sentence. Slowly, deliberately. He turned his head, his eyes moving from Chloe's waist to her name tag and finally to her face. His expression hardened into pure disdain. He didn't answer. He just stared, letting the silence stretch, letting it become uncomfortable. Humiliating. Sparkling, one of the yes-men said quickly. Trying to break the tension, Arthur lifted a hand without looking away from Chloe. I didn't ask you. Brad, he turned fully back to her. Do you know how much this suit cost? Chloe blinked. I'm sorry, sir. This suit, Arthur repeated, gesturing sharply at his lapel. It's custom Brioni. It costs more than you'll make in 2 years. So when you pour that water, if a single drop, a microscopic drop, lands on this fabric, I will have your job. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Chloe whispered. Good, pour. Her hand trembled just once, but she steadied it. She poured the sparkling water with the precision of a surgeon, filling the glass to the perfect level, rotating the bottle at the last second to catch the drip before it fell. Then she stepped back. Arthur watched her closely, disappointment flashing across his face. He wanted her to fail. The menu, he barked. Chloe handed over the leather-bound menus. As she retreated toward the service station, she felt his eyes boring into her back. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He's in a mood. Sarah, the bartender, whispered as Chloe picked up a tray of cocktails. Watch your back, Chloe. I'm trying, Chloe murmured. He's looking for a fight. She had no idea how right she was. By the time the appetizers arrived, Arthur Sterling had already sent back a $1,200 bottle of wine because the cork, according to him, smelled like mediocrity. The kitchen staff was on edge. Henry was sweating through his shirt. Chloe was assigned to clear the plates. As she reached for Arthur's plate, still holding half a lobster tail, he suddenly shifted his elbow. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but deliberate. His elbow struck Chloe's forearm just as she lifted the porcelain. Crash. The plate didn't shatter, but it tipped. Saffron butter sauce slid across the surface, followed by the lobster tail, landing with a wet plop onto the pristine white tablecloth, just inches from Arthur's cuff. The restaurant went silent. It was as if a gun had gone off. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Every eye locked onto table 1. Chloe froze. She knew she hadn't touched him. She knew he had moved his arm into her path. But in a place like the Obsidian Room, the truth didn't matter. Arthur stood slowly. He picked up his napkin and brushed an imaginary speck of dust from his sleeve. Then he looked at Chloe and smiled, a thin, empty smile that never reached his eyes. You clumsy, incompetent cow, Arthur said. He didn't raise his voice, yet it carried effortlessly across the room. Sir, Quiet, he snapped. I warned you. I told you. Look at this mess. He pointed at the stain on the tablecloth. Do you have any idea how to do your job? Or are you only here because you failed at everything else in life? I apologize, Mr. Sterling, Chloe said, her face burning. I'll change the cloth immediately. I don't want you to change the cloth, Arthur sneered. I want you to apologize to my guests for ruining their evening with your incompetence. Arthur, it's fine, the woman in the red dress muttered, clearly uncomfortable. It didn't even touch you. It's the principal, Isabella. Arthur roared, slamming his hand on the table. This place charges a fortune, and they hire slum trash to serve us. He stepped closer to Chloe, invading her space. He smelled of expensive cologne and scotch. Look at you, he said softly. Pathetic. You're shaking. You know you don't belong here, don't you? You're probably barely making rent, living in some rat-infested apartment, hoping a rich man leaves you a big tip so you can buy another pair of cheap shoes. Tears stung Chloe's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. Don't cry. Don't give him the satisfaction. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Sir, she repeated, her voice flat and mechanical. Inconvenience? Arthur laughed. You're a disaster. He looked to his associates for approval. They chuckled nervously, unwilling to disagree with the man who signed their paychecks. Then Arthur did something that changed everything. He sat back down, dismissed Chloe with a lazy wave of his hand, as if she were a stray dog, and turned to the man on his left, a silent partner named Mr. Chun, who had just joined the table. Arthur assumed the drama was over. He assumed the stupid waitress had run off to the kitchen to cry. He assumed he was safe to speak freely. He switched languages. Arthur began speaking in Mandarin. Chinese decent. Business-level Mandarin, delivered with arrogance. Heavy American tones slurred carelessly. Turning to Mr. Chun, he said in Mandarin, "Don't worry about the disruption. These American servers are all idiots' peasant stock. It's impossible to find good help when the country is full of lazy, uneducated trash like her." Mr. Chun nodded slowly, glancing toward Chloe, who still stood near the service station, gripping a tray so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Arthur continued speaking in Mandarin, his voice lowering as he assumed complete privacy in the middle of New York City. "Anyway, Chun, about the acquisition. We're going to screw the union in the merger. I'm hiding the debt in a shell subsidiary. By the time the auditors realize the pension fund is empty, I'll have sold the assets and will be in the Cayman Islands. But we need to sign tonight." He laughed a cruel, guttural sound. "Look at her," he added in Mandarin, gesturing vaguely over his shoulder toward Chloe. "She looks like she's about to cry, probably wondering how she's going to feed her 5 kids. Pathetic." Chloe stood frozen beside the pillar. The tears that had been threatening to fall vanished instantly. The heat in her face was no longer embarrassment or shame. It was rage cold, sharp, and controlled. Arthur Sterling had made 2 mistakes. The first was underestimating her dignity. The second, far more fatal, was assuming she didn't speak Mandarin. Chloe's father had been a U.S. diplomat, stationed in Taipei for 8 years. She had attended Taipei American School, then university in Singapore. She didn't just speak Mandarin. She spoke it fluently, elegantly, with the refined accent of a native intellectual. An accent that made Arthur's clumsy business school Mandarin sound childish. By comparison, she heard everything. She heard the insults. She heard the fraud. She heard the admission of guilt. About the pension fund. Chloe glanced at Henry, who was frantically signaling for her to go back to the kitchen. She looked toward the exit. She could leave. She could walk out, quit, find another job. Then she looked at Arthur's smug back. "No," she thought. "Not tonight." Chloe placed the tray down on the service station. She didn't turn toward the kitchen. She turned around and walked straight back to table 1. The restaurant was still eerily quiet, frozen in the aftermath of the outburst. Henry's eyes went wide. "Chloe, kitchen now," he hissed. She ignored him. She stopped beside Arthur Sterling. Arthur looked up, irritated. "I thought I told you to get out of my face. Bring me the manager. I want you fired." Chloe didn't look at Henry. She looked Arthur dead in the eyes. Something in her posture changed. The slump of the exhausted waitress disappeared. She stood tall, chin lifted, radiating a sudden, unsettling confidence. She opened her mouth, and when she spoke, it wasn't English. The silence in the obsidian room became suffocating, the kind that usually comes just before disaster. Arthur was still sneering, waiting for Henry to drag this incompetent woman away. Chloe took a breath, shallow but steady enough. She locked eyes with him. Then she spoke. "Mr. Sterling," Chloe said, her voice dropping an octave, calm and precise, resonating with an authority that felt impossible coming from a waitress in a stained uniform. She spoke in Mandarin. The clumsy, textbook Mandarin Arthur had used. Her words carried the crisp, rolling sounds of the northern Beijing dialect, the dialect of scholars, diplomats, and old elite families. Your pronunciation of the word peasant was incorrect. She continued in Mandarin, her gaze unflinching. You used the second tone, the rising tone which implies cultivation or farming. She paused, letting it sink in. The word you were looking for to insult me is nongmin, with the third tone. If you're going to insult my lineage, I suggest you learn the grammar properly. It's embarrassing for a man of your stature to sound like a first-year language student. Arthur froze. His mouth opened slightly. But no sound came out. It was as if his brain had. Short-circuited. The fork slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. The metallic sound ringing through the silent room. Like a gunshot. Brad and the other associate stared back and forth between Arthur and Chloe, completely lost. They didn't understand the language, but they understood power, and they saw it shift. Arthur Sterling, the predator, had gone pale. Mr. Chun reacted instantly. His head snapped up. The bored, glazed expression he'd worn all evening vanished, replaced by sharp, calculating focus. Chloe wasn't finished. She stepped closer to the table, ignoring Henry, who was now sprinting across the dining room in full panic. Furthermore, Chloe continued in flawless Mandarin, raising her voice just enough for Mr. Chun to hear every syllable clearly. You mentioned to your associate that you intend to screw the union by hiding the company's debt in a shell subsidiary. You also boasted that by the time the auditors discover the pension fund is empty, you'll already be in the Cayman Islands. Chloe paused, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. Mr. Chun, she continued, shifting her gaze to the potential investor. She offered a slight, respectful bow, a cultural nuance Arthur would never have thought to perform. I apologize for interrupting your meal. However, as a server, I am responsible for maintaining the integrity of this establishment. I believe it would be unethical to allow a guest to conduct fraud at my table. She kept her voice steady. The shell company strategy Mr. Sterling just described to you is a direct violation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. If he signs the deal tonight as planned, you wouldn't be purchasing an asset, you'd be buying a liability. Mr. Chun slowly set his wineglass down. He looked at Arthur. The look wasn't angry. It was cold. It was the expression of a man realizing he had nearly stepped into a bear trap. Is this true? Mr. Chun asked in English, his voice dangerously quiet. Arthur scrambled. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by the sweaty, frantic panic of a con artist caught in bright light. He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. She's lying. Arthur shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Chloe. She's crazy. She's just a disgruntled waitress. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She probably used Google Translate or something. Arthur turned to Henry, who had finally reached the table, breathless and terrified. Get her out of here. Arthur screamed, spit flying. She's harassing me. She's making up lies. I want her arrested. If you don't throw her out right now, I'll buy this building and evict you personally. Henry grabbed Chloe's arm, his grip painful. Chloe, you're done. Get your things, leave now. Let go of me, Chloe said calmly in English. She didn't yank her arm away. She simply looked at Henry with a new, unyielding steadiness. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm only translating what the customer said. I don't care, Henry hissed. You insulted a billionaire. You're fired. Wait. The single word sliced through the chaos. It didn't come from Arthur. It didn't come from Henry. It came from Mr. Chun. He remained seated, yet his presence filled the room. He raised one hand, signaling Henry to stop. Let her go, Mr. Chun said. Double quote, sir. I apologize for her behavior, Henry stammered, sweat pouring down his face. She's clearly unstable. She speaks better Mandarin than my own daughter, Mr. Chun replied, his eyes fixed on Chloe. And she certainly speaks it better than Mr. Sterling. Mr. Chun turned back to Arthur. You told me the pension fund was fully solvent. You told me the debt had been cleared during the Q3 restructuring. It is, Arthur lied, his face blotchy and red. Chun, listen to me. This girl is a nobody. She's obviously a spy for a competitor, or she's trying to blackmail me. You're going to take the word of a servant over mine? I take the word of data, Mr. Chun said calmly. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his phone. Typed a short message, then looked back at Chloe. Young lady, he said. Where did you learn to speak with that accent? Chloe smoothed the front of her uniform. She knew she was fired. She knew she would likely lose her tips. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel like a servant. She felt like the daughter of Thomas Danvers, the man who taught her that integrity was the only currency that mattered. My father was Thomas Danvers, senior attached to the U.S. consulate in Taipei, Chloe said clearly. I grew up in Taiwan and Singapore. I hold a master's degree in international relations from Columbia University. She looked directly at Arthur. I am not a nobody. Mr. Sterling, I am an overqualified woman serving. You water because the economy your kind destroyed made it impossible for me to work in my field. The restaurant fell into deadly silence. A pin dropping would have sounded like a cymbal crash. At the neighboring table, Tech CEO Gavin Reed had stopped eating. Slowly, discreetly, he pulled his phone from his pocket and leaned it against his wine glass. The camera pointed straight at table 1. Arthur looked around. He saw the stairs. He saw the judgment. He felt the walls closing in. He needed control. He needed dominance. He needed to crush her. I don't care who your daddy was, Arthur sneered, stepping closer, using his size to intimidate her. You are a waitress. You are a servant. And you just destroyed your career in this city. I'll make sure you never work in New York again. I will blacklist you, Arthur snarled. From every restaurant, every retail store, every gas station if I have to. He turned sharply to Mr. Chun. Chun, let's go. We'll sign the papers at the office. This place is a circus. Mr. Chun didn't move. He glanced down at his phone, which had just buzzed. He read the message, and his expression darkened. My analyst just ran a preliminary check on the subsidiary you mentioned, Mr. Chun said, his voice ice cold. They found a filing in the Cayman Islands initiated 3 days ago for a shell company called Sterling Horizon. Arthur's face drained of color. The blood left his features so fast he looked almost corpse-like. It appears, Mr. Chun continued, standing slowly, that the waitress was right. The atmosphere inside the obsidian room shifted instantly from awkward tension to high stakes. CORPORAT warfare. The clinking of silverware stopped completely. The wealthy diners, normally sealed inside their bubbles of privilege, were now watching a public dismantling of one of their own. Arthur Sterling was cornered. And like any cornered animal, he lashed out. You hacked my phone. Arthur shouted at Chloe, his logic unraveling. That's illegal. Henry, call the police. She's a corporate spy. She's been recording our conversation. I haven't touched anything, Mr. Sterling, Chloe said calmly. I simply have ears. And you were speaking very loudly because you assumed I was too stupid to understand you. Security. Arthur bellowed, waving his arms wildly. Get this trash out of my face. 2 large security guards in black suits appeared near the entrance. They looked to Henry for direction. Henry, pale and shaking, pointed at Chloe. Escort Ms. Danvers out, he squeaked. And make sure she doesn't take any property. Don't touch her. The deep voice came from the neighboring table. Gavin Reed, the tech billionaire who had been quietly recording, stood up. Younger than Arthur, dressed in a hoodie under a blazer. He wore the unmistakable uniform of Silicon Valley royalty. He walked toward table 1. Relaxed but commanding. Gavin, Arthur said, blinking in recognition. Tell these idiots to do their jobs. This woman is insane. Actually, Arthur, Gavin replied, a smirk tugging at his lips. I've been listening for the last 10 minutes. And I have to say, it's the most entertaining dinner I've had in years. He turned to Chloe. Did you really tell him he used the wrong tone for peasant? I did, Chloe said evenly. He sounded like a tourist asking for directions to the bathroom. Gavin burst out laughing, a loud, genuine bark of amusement. That's incredible, he said. You always bragged about your global mindset, Arthur. Turns out you're just a tourist. Arthur was vibrating with rage. Veins bulged in his neck. He was losing control of the narrative, and for a man like Arthur, image was everything. This is ridiculous, Arthur snapped. I'm leaving. Shun, if you want to do business, call my lawyers in the morning. I'm not staying here to be insulted by the help and some tech bro dropout. He grabbed his jacket and turned to storm out, motioning for his associates and Isabella to follow. Sit down. Arthur, Mr. Chun said, that it wasn't a request. Excuse me? Arthur turned back. I said sit down, Mr. Chun repeated. We're not finished. You attempted to defraud my firm of $200 million. Do you really think you can just walk away? You can't prove anything, Arthur shot back, though his voice wavered. It's hearsay. A waitress's word against mine. And the Cayman Islands filing? Mr. Chun asked. Coincidence? Standard tax optimization? Arthur tried to bluff, but his eyes flipped toward the exit. Mr. Chun turned to Chloe and gestured to the empty chair across from him, the chair Arthur had been sitting in. Miss Danvers, Mr. Chun said. Please sit. Henry audibly gasped. Mr. Chun, she's staff. She can't sit with guests. She is no longer staff, Mr. Chun replied calmly, looking at Henry. You just fired her. Which means she's now a free agent, and I'm inviting her to join my table. Chloe hesitated. Her heart was pounding so hard, she thought it might crack a rib. This was madness. She should leave. She should run before the police actually arrived. Then she looked at Arthur, at the fear finally flickering in his eyes, and understood. Something clearly. She had the upper hand. Chloe untied her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the service station. She smoothed her skirt. Then, with the composure of a diplomat attending a state dinner, she sat down in the velvet booth directly across from Mr. Chun. Arthur looked like he was about to have a stroke. This is a joke, he snapped. Is this some kind of prank show? Where are the cameras, Miss Danvers? Mr. Chun didn't even look at him. You mentioned you studied international relations, Mr. Chun said. Did you focus on Asian markets? I did, Chloe replied, her voice steadying as she stepped into familiar intellectual ground. I wrote my thesis on the intersection of private equity and emerging market debt structures in Southeast Asia, specifically how American firms use shell companies to leverage debt against foreign assets without disclosing it to domestic shareholders. Mr. Chun raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. A relevant topic. Very, Chloe said, glancing briefly at Arthur. In my research, I found those strategies usually collapse within 3 to 5 years, leaving investors with nothing but legal fees and CEOs with golden parachutes. Exactly, Mr. Chun murmured. He turned his cold gaze back to Arthur. It appears this waitress understands your business model better than you do. Arthur slammed both hands onto the table. I'm not staying for this. You want to take financial advice from a girl who clears tables? Fine, go ahead. You'll lose the biggest opportunity of the decade. I think I just avoided the biggest loss of the decade. Mr. Chun replied calmly. Arthur snarled and looked at Chloe with pure hatred. You think you're smart. You think you won. You're nothing. Tomorrow morning, I'll call every contact I have. I'll ruin you. I'll sue you for defamation, slander, emotional distress. I have lawyers who cost more per hour than you've earned in your entire life. Actually, Gavin Reed said casually from where he stood. I wouldn't do that, Arthur. Shut up, Gavin. No. Seriously. Gavin raised his phone. Because I just live streamed this entire thing to my 3 million followers on Twitter. And right now #BillionaireBully is trending. You're going viral, Artie, and not in a good way. Arthur stared at the phone. He pulled out his own device. His hands shook so badly he dropped it. He scrambled to pick it up. Swiping frantically, his face turned a sickly gray. You recorded me," Arthur whispered. "Just the part where you called her peasant stock and admitted to fraud," Gavin said with a shrug. "The internet really hates it when rich guys punch down. PR nightmare. Your stock's going to tank when the market opens." Arthur looked around the room. Every diner was staring. Some held up their phones. The illusion of his invulnerability shattered. The obsidian room, his fortress, had become his cage. But Arthur wasn't done. He was a man who thrived on conflict. And when cornered, he didn't retreat. He destroyed. He fixed his gaze on Chloe. The look in his eyes wasn't just anger anymore. It was dangerous. "You did this," he whispered. "You ruined everything." "You ruined yourself," Chloe replied evenly. "I just turned on the lights." Arthur lunged. It happened in a flash. He reached across the table, grabbing for Chloe. Whether to shake her or strike her, no one knew. It was raw, unfiltered violence born of humiliation. "Arthur, no!" Isabella screamed. Before his hand could reach Chloe, another hand snapped around his wrist. It wasn't security. It wasn't Gavin. It was Mr. Chun. The older man, quiet, reserved, seemingly frail, held Arthur's wrist with an iron grip. He didn't even stand. "Sit down," Mr. Chun commanded, his voice vibrating with authority. "Do not make this worse." Arthur gasped, struggling to pull free. "Let go of me." "Get out," Mr. Chun said. Releasing him with a sharp shove, Arthur stumbled backward into a waiter, sending a tray of glasses crashing to the floor. He stood there panting, suit disheveled, sweat slicking his face. "This isn't over," Arthur hissed at Chloe. "You hear me? This isn't over." Then he turned and stormed out. His entourage scrambled after him like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The heavy oak doors slammed shut. For a moment, the restaurant was silent. Then someone began clapping. It was Gavin Reed. Then another person joined in. Then another. Soon, half the restaurant was applauding. It felt surreal, cinematic. But Chloe didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. The adrenaline drained from her body, leaving her hands trembling. Henry stood nearby, pale and shaken. He knew he had backed the wrong horse. "Miss Danvers," he began, voice unsteady. Perhaps we were too hasty. If you'd like to finish your shift." Chloe looked at him. She looked at her stained uniform. She thought of the heavy trays, the long nights, the silence she had learned to survive in. "No." "Henry," she said softly, "I don't think I will." She turned to Mr. Chun. "Thank you, sir, for listening." "No," Mr. Chun replied, his expression serious. "Do not leave yet, Miss Danvers. We have business to discuss." "Business?" Chloe asked, confused. "Sir, I just got fired. I need to figure out how I'm going to pay my rent." "You have a master's degree in international relations," Mr. Chun said calmly. "You speak Mandarin with a Beijing dialect and English with native fluency. You understand debt structuring and shell corporations. And you had the courage to stand up to a bully like Arthur Sterling." Mr. Chun reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy black cardstock with gold embossing. "My assistant just texted me," he continued. "We fired our chief analyst for the Asia-Pacific region last week. He lacked intuition. I believe you may be a suitable replacement." Chloe stared at the card. "Chun Global Holdings, one of the largest investment firms in Asia. I don't know what to say." Chloe stammered. Say yes, Gavin Reed called from the next table. And order the lobster. It's on me. Chloe looked from the card to Mr. Chen. This was the moment, the twist of fate she had prayed for during long nights of studying while her feet ached from waiting tables. She began, before she could finish. The restaurant doors burst open. The applause died instantly. It wasn't Arthur. Two uniformed NYPD officers entered, followed by a man in a sharp gray suit carrying a briefcase. He looked like a lawyer, sleek, predatory, a shark in human skin. Which one of you is Chloe Danvers? The man demanded, his voice slicing through the room. Chloe's heart dropped. Arthur worked fast. I am, Chloe said, standing slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The lawyer marched over with the officers and slammed a document down in front of her. Ms. Danvers, he said coldly, I represent Mr. Arthur Sterling. You are being served with a temporary restraining order and a civil lawsuit for defamation, tortious interference with business contracts, and emotional distress. Mr. Sterling is seeking damages of $10 million. He turned to the officers. And we are also pressing charges for theft. Theft? Chloe gasped. I didn't steal anything. Mr. Sterling claims his platinum cufflinks went missing after you cleared his table, the lawyer said, smiling a thin, reptilian smile. Officer, I'd like her searched and taken into custody. Mr. Chen stood up, his face thunderous. This is absurd. This is the law, the lawyer snapped. Unless you'd like to be named a co-conspirator, I suggest you sit down. One of the officers stepped forward, handcuffs already out. Ma'am. Turn around. The room seemed to lose all its air. Chloe felt the cold metal snap around her wrists. The victory had lasted exactly 5 minutes. Arthur Sterling didn't just want to win. He wanted to incinerate her. She looked at Mr. Chen. She looked at Gavin. They were stunned. But the law was the law. A theft accusation meant procedure. As the officers led her out of the obsidian room, past the table she had served only minutes earlier, Chloe didn't cry. She held her head high, inside. She was screaming. She was going to jail, and Arthur Sterling was still winning, or so he thought. Holding cell at the 19th precinct. Smelled of ammonia and old sweat, a brutal contrast to the lavender-scented air of the obsidian room. Chloe sat on a cold metal bench, knees pulled to her chest. They had taken her shoelaces, her belt, and her phone. For 3 hours, she was processed like a criminal, fingerprinted, photographed, searched. The officer who patted her down had been apologetic, almost gentle. They didn't find the platinum cufflinks. Of course they didn't. Chloe hadn't taken them. But Arthur's lawyer Sterling Vance, no relation, just another shark swimming in the same waters, insisted she must have handed them to an accomplice or hidden them in the restroom. He filed a formal complaint for grand larceny. In New York, theft of items valued over $3,000 was a felony. Arthur claimed the cufflinks were worth $50,000. Chloe rested her forehead against the cool cinder block wall. Her career was over, even if she was cleared. The arrest would flag every background check. The $10 million lawsuit would bankrupt her family before it ever reached trial. Arthur Sterling didn't need to win the theft case. He only needed to bury her under the weight of the process. Danvers, a guard called, rapping his baton against the bars. You made bail. Chloe blinked, disoriented. I don't have money for bail. Someone posted it. High profile. Grab your things. She stood, legs shaky, and walked out into the fluorescent glare of the precinct lobby. Squinting, she expected to see Henry, maybe to fire her again, or a public defender. Instead, the lobby was chaos. A dozen reporters shouted over one another as cameras flashed. Ms. Danvers, did you steal the cufflinks? Is it true Arthur Sterling committed fraud? Chloe, look this way. Back up. Stay back. A large man in a dark suit shoved the reporters aside, carving a path through the crowd. It wasn't the police. It was private security. Behind the wall of muscle stood Mr. Chun. And beside him was a man Chloe hadn't seen in 10 years, but recognized instantly. He was older now, his hair white instead of gray, but he still carried the rigid posture of a man who had stared down dictators. Uncle Elias, Chloe whispered. Elias Thorne was one of the most feared defense attorneys in Washington, D.C. Before that, he had been her father's chief of staff in Taipei. He was the man who had taught Chloe how to play chess when she was 6 years old. Elias stepped forward and pulled her into a brief, firm hug. I got the call from Chun. I was in D.C., took the red-eye immediately, he said. You look like hell, kid. I didn't take them, Elias, Chloe said, her voice cracking. I swear. I know you didn't, Elias replied, his voice hard as stone. Thomas Danvers' daughter doesn't steal. He turned toward the cameras, his demeanor shifting instantly like a shark entering feeding waters. Elias raised one hand, and the reporters fell silent. Elias Thorne commanded that kind of respect. My client, Miss Chloe Danvers, has been the victim of a malicious prosecution and a false arrest orchestrated by Arthur Sterling to silence a whistleblower, Elias announced. We will not only be fighting these fabricated charges, we will be filing a countersuit for defamation, false imprisonment, and abuse of process. He paused, letting the words land. Arthur Sterling wanted a fight, Elias said coldly. He has won. He guided Chloe toward a waiting black SUV. Get in. We have work to do. Inside the car, the noise of the city faded away. Mr. Chun sat on the leather bench seat, studying a tablet. Gavin Reed was in the front passenger seat, typing furiously on a laptop. You okay? Gavin asked, glancing back. By the way, the internet is going insane. You're trending higher than the Super Bowl. Mr. Chun posted your bail, Elias explained. $200,000. Chloe stared at Mr. Chun, stunned. Double quote, sir. I can't pay you back. You are my employee now, Mr. Chun said simply, without looking up from his tablet. Consider it a signing bonus. Besides, we'll make that money back from Arthur's hide. Where are we going? Chloe asked. The war room, Gavin said with a grin. Also known as my penthouse suite at the pier. We've got footage to review. The war room was a sprawling suite overlooking Central Park, crowded with monitors, servers, and empty coffee cups. Gavin Reed's team, 3 young hackers, who looked like they hadn't slept in days, were already at work. All right. Here's the situation, Gavin said, clapping his hands as Chloe, Elias, and Mr. Chen settled onto white leather couches. He pulled up a video feed on the massive, wall-mounted screen. This is the footage from my phone, Gavin explained. We've got the audio of Arthur admitting to fraud. That part's solid. He exhaled, but his lawyers are already spinning it. They released a statement 10 minutes ago claiming Arthur was role-playing a hypothetical scenario to test Mr. Chen's due diligence. Weak defense, but it might muddy things in court on the fraud charge. But the theft, Elias said, leaning forward. That's the hook. If she's a thief, she's not a credible witness. We need to kill that charge. We tried pulling the restaurant security footage, one of Gavin's hackers said. But the system conveniently malfunctioned and deleted the last 4 hours. Arthur got to Henry. Chloe felt a knot tighten in her stomach. So it's my word against his. Not exactly, Gavin said, smiling a sharp, predatory smile. Arthur's a boomer. He thinks security cameras are the only eyes in the room. He forgot we live in the age of the influencer. Gavin tapped a key. I scraped Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat for geotags at the Obsidian room between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. P.M. found this. A video appeared. On the screen dot, it was a selfie video taken by a teenage girl at table 3 directly behind Arthur's booth. She was making a duck face for the camera, but over her shoulder, Arthur Sterling was clearly visible. This was recorded at 8:42 p.m., Gavin narrated. 2 minutes before the spill incident. On screen, Arthur was talking to Isabella, visibly agitated. He reached up to his left cuff, unclasped it, and slid the platinum cufflink into his jacket pocket. Then he did the same with the right one. The room went completely silent. He took them off. Chloe breathed. He took them off before I even cleared the appetizer plates. Wait for it, Gavin said. In the video, Arthur checked his pocket, patted it to make sure they were secure, then turned and waited for Chloe to approach. The clip ended as the girl stopped recording. Got him, Elias Thorne whispered, pure satisfaction flashing across his face. That's definitive proof of filing a false police report. Class E felony, perjury, defamation per se. Can we release this? Mr. Chun asked. We could, Elias said, standing and pacing. But if we drop it now, his lawyers will scream deep fake and try to bury it. No, we trap him. We need him to lie on record, under oath or in a public forum where he can't walk it back. He's going on the morning show tomorrow, Chloe said. She had seen the notification on her phone before it was confiscated. An exclusive interview to clear his name and warn about the dangers of corporate espionage. Elias smiled. Perfect. We let him dig the hole. We let him go on national television and tell the world you stole those cufflinks. We let him commit to the lie in front of 10 million viewers. And then, Gavin finished, we drop the hammer. Mr. Chun turned to Chloe. Are you ready for this, Miss Danvers? It will get ugly. He will say terrible things about you before we can stop him. Chloe thought about the way Arthur had looked at her, like she was dirt, like she was nothing. She thought about her father, who had died with barely a penny to his name because he refused to take bribes. I'm ready, Chloe said, the next morning. The city felt electric. The hashtag Waitress vs Billionaire was the #1 trending topic in the world. Chloe sat in the green room of the television studio. She wasn't a guest, not yet. Officially, she was Gavin Reed's assistant. Gavin had used his connections to get them inside the building, on the monitor. The morning show was live. Arthur Sterling sat in a plush armchair across from the host, looking solemn, wounded. A different suit, same image, the aggrieved titan of industry. Arthur, the host said gently, leaning in. It's been a whirlwind 24 hours. Can you tell us what happened? It's tragic, really, Arthur said with a sigh, shaking his head. You try to support the working class. We tip well. We're polite. And then you have someone like this unstable young woman. He paused, letting the words sink in. I don't want to ruin her life, he continued. But she stole heirlooms that belonged to my grandfather. Platinum cufflinks, irreplaceable. And you're certain she took them? The host asked. 100%? Arthur looked straight into the camera. Absolutely. I was wearing them when I sat down. She was the only person who came near me after she caused that scene and threw food at me, which she did, by the way, and then they were gone. It's a clear case of theft born out of jealousy. In the green room, Elias Thorne was already on the phone with the district attorney. Did you hear that? Elias said quietly. He just locked himself into the timeline. He claimed he was wearing them when she approached. We have video of him removing them 10 minutes earlier. Send the warrant. Arthur continued, gaining confidence. And this nonsense about fraud, it's a distraction. She's working for a competitor. It's corporate sabotage. I built my company on integrity. Suddenly, the host's earpiece buzzed. She touched her ear, her expression shifting from sympathy to confusion. Arthur, she said, cutting him off. I'm getting some breaking information. What is it? Arthur asked, smiling, assuming it was news of Chloe's arrest. The massive screen behind them changed. It wasn't a news graphic. It was the TikTok video. For a second, a pop song played before the audio cut out, but the image was crystal clear, zoomed in on Arthur's hands. Unclasp. Arthur turned to look at the screen. His face went slack. The host looked at the screen, then back at him. Arthur, she said slowly, this video is time-stamped 20 minutes before the alleged incident. You just told us you were wearing them. That's not, Arthur stammered. He jumped to his feet, tearing off his microphone. This is a setup. Where did you get that? We're not done. Gavin Reed's voice echoed through the studio speakers. He had hacked the feed. The screen changed again. This time, the screen filled with a spreadsheet, dense, precise, and devastating. This, Gavin's voice narrated, is the ledger for Sterling Horizon in the Cayman Islands. Mr. Chun's team cracked it this morning. It shows a $40 million transfer from the Sterling Hale employee pension fund directly into Arthur Sterling's personal offshore account. The numbers scrolled. The transfer was authorized yesterday at 5 p.m. Arthur looked like a trapped rat. He glanced at the cameras and realized too late they were still broadcasting live. He bolted for the edge of the stage, but before he could escape, two men in windbreakers stepped out from behind the curtains. FBI, the lead agent said, his voice clearly picked up by the boom microphones. Arthur Sterling, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, filing a false police report, and embezzlement. Arthur froze. He looked at the audience. He looked at the camera. And then for a brief moment, he looked past the lights into the shadows of the studio wings. Chloe Danvers stood there. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform anymore. She wore a sharp navy blazer borrowed from Isabella, who had flipped on Arthur the moment his empire started sinking. Chloe didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply watched. Arthur Sterling was handcuffed on live national television. The so-called untouchable billionaire was dragged offstage, screaming obscenities, his legacy collapsing in real time. 3 months later, the Obsidian Room was gone. The scandal had been too large. The brand was radioactive. The space was being gutted, slated to reopen as a high-end vegan bistro. Chloe Danvers walked down 57th Street in heels comfortable Manolo Blahniks she had bought herself. She entered the skyscraper housing the New York headquarters of Chun Global Holdings. The security guard at the front desk smiled. Good morning, Miss Danvers. Morning, Mike, Chloe replied, smiling back. She took the elevator to the 40th floor. The office buzzed with activity. She passed rows of analysts, many Ivy League graduates who now reported to her. She stepped into her corner office. The nameplate on the door read Chloe Danvers, VP of Strategic Analysis. You're late, a voice said from the couch. Gavin Reed was sprawled there, tossing a stress ball. We've got a meeting with the Senate Finance Committee in an hour. They want your testimony on loopholes in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. I was grabbing coffee, Chloe said, setting down 2 cups. One for me. One for the guy who saved my life. Gavin caught his cup. Technically, you saved yourself. I just handled the tech. He smirked. Oh, and did you see the news? Arthur's bail was denied. He's facing 20 years. His lawyers are trying an insanity defense. Apparently, the stress of wealth made him do it. He is insane, Chloe said, sitting at her desk. Insane enough to think he could treat people like objects. Her phone rang. It was Mr. Chun, calling from Singapore. Chloe, he said warmly. The lithium plant acquisition is complete. The union leaders called personally. They wanted to thank you for restructuring the pension deal. Their benefits were preserved. That's good to hear, sir, Chloe said. You have a very bright future, Mr. Chun continued. but never forget where you started. I won't, Chloe replied. She glanced at the small framed item on her desk, thought it wasn't a family photo, that it was her old obsidian room name tag. A reminder. She hung up and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. From up here, the city looked different. Not like a fortress anymore, but like a puzzle. And she finally had the pieces. She wasn't the woman who poured the water anymore. She was the one who directed the flow, and that is how Arthur Sterling, the man who believed money gave him the right to be a monster, was brought down by the very person he tried to destroy. Because real power isn't about the suit you wear or the size of your bank account. It's about character, intelligence, and the dignity you carry yourself with. Arthur Sterling bet against Chloe Danvers because he saw a waitress. He lost everything because he failed to see the warrior beneath. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that underdogs can bite back. What would you have done in Chloe's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.